Hey, listener. So today we're going to dive into some pretty heavy stuff. A situation that I think a lot of you out there listening might relate to. We're talking long-term relationships and those unexpected twists and turns that life seems to throw at us. Our listener in this case is a 29-year-old guy who turned to Reddit for advice after his girlfriend of over 11 years confessed to him that she's developed feelings for another man.
It's a situation that can really shake you to your core,
Yeah.
and the raw honesty of his Reddit post gives us a lot to unpack.
Absolutely. So to really make this deep dive hit home, let's imagine that you, the listener, are the one going through this. You and your girlfriend have been together since high school. 11 and a half years of shared history, facing family drama, financial stress, even navigating mental health struggles together.
Yeah, that's a significant bond. It makes sense that this news would feel like a total blindside.
It does. And to make things even more complicated, the other man is a music producer who works with your girlfriend who's a singer. So they've got this creative connection, which adds another layer of difficulty.
Yeah.
Right? You're dealing with guilt, blaming yourself, wondering if you somehow caused her feelings. On top of that, your girlfriend has a history of trauma and mental health challenges.
It's a lot to process, for sure. It's interesting that your first instinct is to kind of shoulder the blame.
Yeah,
But we need to remember that relationships involve two people, and ultimately we can't control another person's feelings.
that's a good point. I'm curious, how common is it for people in long-term relationships to develop feelings for someone else? Is this something that just happens, or is it always a sign of something deeper going wrong?
Well, it's probably more common than you might think. And it doesn't always signal a major problem. You see, we're constantly evolving as individuals, and our needs and desires change over time. Sometimes we find ourselves drawn to people who fulfill different aspects of ourselves, especially if we feel like those needs aren't being met in our current relationships. Now, this doesn't justify acting on those feelings, of course, but understanding the root cause is really important.
So you're saying it's not necessarily a reflection of something I did wrong.
Not necessarily. There are always internal and external factors at play. In your case, your girlfriend has been dealing with a lot. Family trauma, depression, even suicidal thoughts. It's possible that she sought comfort and connection in a place where she felt understood, and that happened to be with this music producer.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I also mentioned some cringy early signs that I may have missed or maybe chose to ignore, like the producer telling my girlfriend he hugs a pillow pretending it's her when he goes to bed.
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty blatant sign. But love can blind us, and it sounds like you trusted your girlfriend implicitly. It's a classic case of not wanting to see what's right in front of us, especially when we don't want to face the potential consequences.
Okay, that stings a little,
Mm.
but I can see how that might have happened. This brings up something that feels crucial to me and maybe for all of us, the importance of clear communication in relationships.
Absolutely. Bottling up your feelings or making assumptions about your partner's thoughts creates a breeding ground for resentment and misunderstandings. Creating a safe space for open and honest sharing about what's going on both internally and externally is vital.
So you're saying I should have confronted my girlfriend about the pillow hugging comment. Wouldn't that have seemed crazy jealous at the time?
Not necessarily. It's about expressing your feelings in a healthy way. Instead of accusing her, you could have said, "Hey, I heard about this comment the producer made. To be honest, it made me feel a little uncomfortable. Can we talk about it?" That opens the door for a conversation without putting her on the defensive.
That's a good approach. I wish I'd thought of that back then. This whole situation is made even harder because I feel so isolated. I had a falling out with my friend group a while back, so I don't have that support system to lean on right now.
That's a crucial point. Going through something like this without a support network can feel incredibly isolating and overwhelming. We're social creatures. Having people to confide in, offer perspectives, and just be there for us is essential for our well-being.
Exactly. And, listener, if you're out there feeling the same way, I want to emphasize that you are not alone. Even if you feel like you've lost your immediate support system, there are resources available, people who care, and communities, both online and offline, where you can find connection and understanding.
And sometimes professional support can be invaluable in these situations. A therapist can provide a neutral, objective space to process your emotions, gain coping mechanisms, and develop a plan to move forward.
All right, sometimes we need a professional to help us sort through all this. Okay, so we've laid out the scene. A long-term relationship hit by a major challenge, and you feeling heartbroken and isolated, seeking guidance. Let's dive into the world of Reddit and see what advice the internet has to offer.
Buckle up, Reddit's never shy about opinions.
From what I've seen, the responses to your post run the gamut. We got the hardliners demanding ultimatums, the empathizers advocating for communication and working through issues, and the been there, done that crew sharing their cautionary tales. Plus, there are going to be some wild suggestions mixed in there.
It's like a microcosm of society, all condensed into a comments section. Let's start with the hardliners, the ones who are all about, she ends it with him or you walk. What do you make of that advice?
It's tempting, right? Especially when you're hurting and feeling betrayed. But is that kind of ultimatum ever a good idea?
Well, it can be a tempting quick fix, but let's look at some of the specific ultimatums people suggested. One commenter said, tell her if she doesn't cut off contact with the producer, you're done. That's a pretty harsh approach, and it doesn't leave much room for discussion.
Yeah, it's like a take it or leave it proposition.
Exactly. And while setting boundaries is important, this kind of ultimatum could backfire.
Yeah.
It might make your girlfriend feel cornered and resentful, even if she knows she's in the wrong.
So ultimatums handle with care. What about the empathizers? They seem to be suggesting a more nuanced approach.
Right. They acknowledge that crushes happen even in committed relationships, and they emphasize the importance of open communication. One commenter wrote, it sounds like she's going through a lot. Maybe try couples therapy to figure out what's really going on and if you can work through this together.
That sounds more like a let's talk this through and understand each other vibe.
Exactly. Therapy can be a valuable tool in this situation. A skilled therapist can guide couples through those difficult conversations, help them understand each other's perspectives, and work towards rebuilding trust and intimacy.
Like having a referee for your relationship. Someone to keep things from getting too heated.
Exactly. And in your situation with your girlfriend's history of trauma, a therapist could help you both understand how her past experiences might be influencing her current behavior.
Okay, so we've got ultimatums on one end of the spectrum and therapy on the other. What about the been there, done that, folks? What kind of stories are they sharing?
There are some powerful personal experiences being shared. One commenter wrote, I was the other woman once. I was in a bad place emotionally, and I latched onto the attention from someone who seemed to understand me. Looking back, I realized I was seeking validation and escape, not true love.
Wow. That's a pretty honest confession. It must be validating for you, listener, to hear that you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. And another commenter shared a story about how they successfully worked through a similar situation with their partner. They wrote, we went to therapy, set boundaries, and really recommitted to communicating openly. It took time and effort, but we came out stronger on the other side.
That's encouraging to hear. It shows that even though this situation is incredibly painful, it doesn't have to mean the end of your relationship.
Exactly. And those personal stories add another dimension to the advice. It's one thing to hear general suggestions, but it's another to hear from people who have walked a similar path.
It makes it more real, more relatable. All right, we've covered the hardliners, the empathizers, and the been there, done that crew. But this is Reddit, so, there have to be some unconventional takes in the mix. What are some of the more out there suggestions you've come across?
Welcome back to our deep dive, listener. We're exploring those really tough questions about love and loss and finding answers in the sometimes unpredictable world of Reddit.
Right. And we left off talking about those unconventional takes, those wildcard suggestions that you always seem to find on Reddit. Remember, we're putting you in the listener's shoes here. So what are some of the more out there pieces of advice that people are giving?
Oh, there are some real gems. One commenter suggested, join a gym, get jacked, and join Cobra Kai. Another said, leave the city together and start fresh somewhere new. And believe it or not, someone even recommended, take the passports you were going to use for your proposal and book a romantic trip to win her back.
Okay, those are interesting. Do you think there's any wisdom hidden in those seemingly absurd suggestions?
There might be. Take the get jacked and join Cobra Kai suggestion. It's obviously meant to be humorous, but it speaks to the importance of self-care during tough times. Focusing on your physical and mental well-being can give you a sense of control and strength when everything else feels chaotic.
So channeling your inner Johnny Lawrence, I can see that. What about the leave the city together idea? Could a change of scenery actually help?
It's possible. A new environment could create space for new experiences and conversations. A chance to reconnect away from the reminders of what's causing you pain. However, it's important not to use a grand gesture like that as a Band-Aid solution. Running away from the problem won't fix the underlying issues.
You can't just outrun your problems.
Yeah.
And the passport suggestion, is there any merit to trying to rekindle the romance in the midst of this crisis?
It depends on the intention. If it comes from a genuine desire to reconnect with your girlfriend and rebuild what you've lost, then maybe. But if it's driven by desperation or fear of losing her, it might not be the best approach.
It all boils down to being honest with yourself about why you're doing something. That seems to be a recurring theme in this whole deep dive. But let's not forget the cynics, the ones who think the relationship is doomed and you should just cut your losses. They can be pretty harsh, but are they ever right?
Sometimes, as difficult as it is to hear the cynics have a point, relationships aren't always meant to last forever, and sometimes it's possible to reach a breaking point where things are no longer healthy or sustainable.
So how do you know when it's time to walk away? That's a tough question.
It is. There's no easy answer, and it's a deeply personal decision. It requires honesty with yourself, acknowledging your needs and boundaries. One commenter put it bluntly, "Dude, she's checked out. Stop trying to fix it and move on." While that might sound harsh, it's a reminder that sometimes it's necessary to accept the reality of the situation, however painful it may be.
It's not about winning or losing. It's about honoring yourself and what you deserve in a relationship.
Speaking of honoring yourself, I remember you mentioned feeling responsible for your girlfriend's depression and suicidal thoughts. That's a heavy burden to carry.
It is, and it's a common response for those who are deeply empathetic and caring. But you need to remember that you can't fix another person's problems, nor should you try.
It's about supporting them through their struggles, not taking ownership of their emotions. Some of those Reddit comments blamed your girlfriend calling her out for her behavior and saying she's using her trauma as an excuse. What are your thoughts on that? Well, those comments highlight a lack of understanding around trauma. Trauma is a real and profound experience that can have long-lasting effects on mental and emotional health. It's not an excuse, but it provides crucial context for understanding her actions. You can support your girlfriend while also recognizing that she has her own journey to navigate, one that's been shaped by her experiences.
It's about finding that balance between compassion and holding someone accountable for their actions. But I also remember you admitting to missing those early cringy signs. Are you being too hard on yourself for that?
Hindsight is 20/20. It's easy to look back and spot those red flags we missed. But remember, you were operating with a different set of information and emotions back then.
And sometimes we choose to ignore those signs because we don't want to see the potential reality.
That's self-preservation kicking in. We instinctively avoid pain, even if it means delaying the inevitable. It's important to acknowledge those moments without getting stuck in a cycle of self-blame. What matters now is learning from the experience and using that knowledge to move forward.
So what's the key takeaway here for our listener and for anyone finding themselves in a similar situation?
Practice self-compassion. Acknowledge the pain, the confusion, the guilt, but also recognize that you're human. You did the best you could with the information you had at the time. Even the harshest Reddit comments can be helpful in a way. They offer a range of perspectives, some more constructive than others, but ultimately remind you that there's no single right way to handle this.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the emotional side of things, but what about the practical aspects of moving forward, whether that means staying in the relationship or ending it? Some Reddit comments focused on that.
Right. Those comments focused on the logistics and the emotional steps involved in moving on regardless of your decision. There are many suggestions about therapy, both individual and couples counseling.
Therapy keeps coming up. Sounds like a good starting point.
It is. It provides a safe space to process those intense emotions, develop healthy coping mechanisms, and explore your options for the future.
Like having a guide through a confusing and emotional wilderness.
Exactly. And remember, you mentioned feeling isolated. Therapy can also fill that gap, offering a consistent source of support and guidance. Beyond therapy, there were also suggestions about setting boundaries, communicating your needs, and even exploring alternative relationship models.
Wait, alternative relationship models. What does that even mean?
Some commenters mentioned polyamory, which is the practice of having multiple romantic relationships with the consent of everyone involved.
Okay, that's definitely not for everyone, but it's interesting that it came up.
It just goes to show that there are many different ways to approach relationships. What works for one couple may not work for another. It's about finding what aligns with your individual needs and values.
So it's not just black and white, stay or go. It's about exploring the gray areas and finding solutions that work for both partners.
Absolutely. And that takes open communication, empathy, and willingness to consider new possibilities, even if they seem unconventional at first.
What about those comments that were all about you needing to grow a pair and take charge? They seemed a bit aggressive.
The language can be harsh, but I think those comments in their own way are about empowerment. They're encouraging you to advocate for your needs, set clear boundaries, and make choices that align with your values.
So it's not about being aggressive or controlling, but about owning your role in the relationship.
Exactly. And part of that is recognizing you have the right to walk away from a situation that no longer serves you, even if it's incredibly painful. Remember, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about respecting yourself and what you deserve.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. We barely scratched the surface of this complex situation.
There's so much more to explore. We'll delve into your specific questions and concerns, listener, in part 3.
And we'll explore the potential outcomes of this situation, offering guidance on how to move forward whatever path you choose.
Until then, remember, you are not alone. Even in the midst of heartbreak and uncertainty, there's always hope for healing and growth.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, listener. We've been through a lot together, haven't we? Exploring the ups and downs of a relationship in crisis, sifting through that diverse advice from the Reddit community, and most importantly, putting you in the driver's seat of this whole situation.
Right. We've covered that emotional roller coaster of heartbreak, the guilt and self-doubt that can surface, and that really important piece about self-compassion. Now, in this final part of our deep dive, let's focus on what comes next. What are some practical steps that you can take to move forward, whether you choose to stay in the relationship or walk away?
That's what I'm most curious about, too. It's easy to feel so overwhelmed and kind of paralyzed by this kind of situation. What can our listener do to regain a sense of control and start moving in a positive direction?
Well, action is empowering, even those small steps. We've already talked about therapy, and I want to reiterate how valuable that can be. A therapist can really help you process your emotions, gain clarity, and develop those coping mechanisms that will serve you well, regardless of what happens with the relationship.
It's like having a personal trainer for your emotional well-being, someone to guide you through the tough workouts and help you build resilience. But what about those times when you're not in therapy? What can you do on a daily basis to take care of yourself?
Self-care is essential, and it looks different for everyone. Some people find solace in physical activity, going for a run, hitting the gym, or even just taking a walk in nature. Others find peace through those mindfulness practices, like meditation or spending time in nature.
Connecting with friends and family, even if it's just a quick phone call or a video chat, can make a big difference too. It's about nourishing your mind, body, and soul, replenishing those reserves that have been depleted by this whole emotional roller coaster.
Exactly. And remember, self-care isn't selfish. It's about putting yourself in a position to make those clear-headed decisions and take care of your own well-being. Another crucial step, whether you stay or go, is setting clear boundaries.
What kind of boundaries are we talking about in this situation?
Well, it depends on your individual needs and what feels safe for you. It might mean limiting contact with the music producer, either temporarily or permanently. Or it could involve creating space for yourself within the relationship, carving out time for individual pursuits and self-reflection.
Boundaries are all about protecting your energy and well-being. And sometimes that means saying no, even when it's difficult. But I imagine that open and honest communication with your girlfriend is also essential, regardless of what path you choose.
You're absolutely right. That means expressing your needs and feelings clearly and assertively, but also being willing to listen to her perspective without judgment. Remember, communication is a two-way street.
It's not about attacking or blaming. It's about understanding each other's perspectives, even if you don't agree with them. And if you do decide to try and work things out, rebuilding trust is going to be a major part of that whole process.
Trust is like a fragile vase that's been shattered. It can be glued back together, but the cracks will always be there. Rebuilding trust takes consistent action day after day, proving through your words and actions that you're reliable, honest, and respectful.
It's not about grand gestures or empty promises. It's about showing up consistently and demonstrating that you're worthy of that trust. And through it all, it's important to be patient with yourself.
Healing takes time. Whether it's from a physical injury or emotional heartbreak, it's okay to have good days and bad days. Allow yourself to feel the full range of emotions without judgment.
And don't be afraid to reach out for professional support if you're struggling. Therapy can provide the tools and guidance you need to navigate this challenging time.
You've come a long way on this deep dive, listener. We've explored the depths of a complicated situation, unpacked the diverse perspectives of the Reddit community, and offered guidance on how to move forward.
And through it all, we've emphasized the importance of self-compassion, clear communication, and setting healthy boundaries. Remember, you are not alone in this.
Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most challenging experiences. You have the opportunity to emerge from this with a deeper understanding of yourself, your needs, and what you truly desire in a relationship.
And that's what it's all about, learning, evolving, and becoming the best version of yourself. No matter what path you choose, listener, we believe in you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, take care.